The year is 1845. America is restless. From the bustling streets of St. Louis to the quiet farms of Ohio, a single word echoes across the land: Oregon. Not just a place on a map, but a promise, a whispered dream of fertile soil, new beginnings, and a future unbound by the constraints of the East. This is the story of the Great Migration. The story of those who chose to leave everything they knew behind, to walk 2,000 miles, and to face the untamed heart of the continent on what would become known as the Oregon Trail. Before the journey began, there was the gathering. In places like Independence and St. Joseph, Missouri, a critical mass of humanity converged. This was the staging ground, a chaotic, temporary metropolis where diverse families learned they would rely on each other for survival. The first and most crucial decision was the wagon. Forget the romantic image of the massive Conestoga. Those were too heavy. The typical prairie schooner was a simpler, smaller farm wagon, stripped down and covered in canvas. It was not a vehicle for riding. It was a glorified shelf for supplies. A common joke among the pioneers was that the wagon was only for the sick, the elderly, and the very young. Everyone else walked. Every single step. Preparation was paramount. The common estimate was a 6-month journey, and they had to be completely self-sufficient. The core of life was food. A family of 4 would typically need at least 1 ton of supplies. Flour, 500 pounds, the foundation for bread and hardtack. Bacon, 200 pounds, salted for preservation. Coffee and sugar, precious luxuries that became essential morale boosters. And then the tools, shovels, axes, and ropes, tools that would literally build their way across the wilderness. Every wagon was packed to the canvas brim, an entire life compressed into a 10-foot box. No single family could cross the plains alone. Safety lay in numbers, and so the wagon train was born. They elected a captain, often a former trapper or military man, responsible for setting the daily schedule, finding campsites, and most critically, adjudicating disputes. The official start date was usually late April or early May. Any earlier, and the grass for the draft animals hadn't grown enough. Any later, they risked hitting the high passes of the Rockies after the first snows, a fatal mistake. Finally, the moment of departure. The captain gives the signal, and with a creak of wood and the cracking of the whip, the train begins to move. They cross the Missouri River, leaving behind the last vestiges of civilization. The journey had begun. The romance of the West quickly met the relentless reality of the trail. The life of a pioneer was a crushing routine, dictated by the sun. At 4 a.m., the bugle, or horn sounds. The men catch and hitch the oxen. The women prepare a quick hot breakfast, often just coffee and leftover hardtack. By 6 a.m., the train is moving. The pace is agonizingly slow, 2 miles per hour. About 15 miles a day on good ground. The dust, kicked up by hundreds of hooves and dozens of wheels, was omnipresent. It coated everything: lungs, food, clothes, and temper. At noon, a quick cold stop for lunch. The animals must graze, even if only for an hour. By 5 p.m., the train halts. The wagons are drawn into a circle, forming a corral for the animals and a defensive perimeter. The women begin the repetitive task of cooking dinner over a buffalo chip fire, utilizing dried dung, the only fuel for miles. The traditional gender roles of the East blurred on the trail. While men drove the wagons and handled security, women often walked as much, if not more, than the men. They were responsible for the laundry, a grueling, opportunistic task often done in a river, the cooking, and the constant care of the children, who were oftentimes the most vulnerable. Children quickly learned their utility. They drove livestock, collected fuel, and retrieved water, and sometimes were lost for a terrifying moment, swallowed up by the immense, rolling prairie. The trail itself became an enemy. The first serious river crossings, like the Platte River, were terrifying ordeals. Heavy storms could turn the prairie into a quagmire, bogging down wagons and soaking supplies. Then came the dry spells, where the lack of good, clean water led to the first major cause of death: disease. Cholera, dysentery, and typhoid fever spread through the close-quartered, often unsanitary camps like wildfire. These were the true terrors of the trail. One historian estimated that for every 10 pioneers who set out, 1 did not survive the journey. The trail was littered with graves, most of them marked by simple wooden crosses, or on many occasions not marked at all. As the train moved west, the landscape shifted dramatically, offering glimpses of wonder that momentarily lifted the crushing weight of the journey. These geological titans became navigational beacons and crucial morale boosters. Chimney Rock, a towering spire of sandstone, visible for miles. It was a sign that they had reached the end of the Great Plains and were approaching the mountainous country. Scott's Bluff, another immense formation, often climbed by the younger, more energetic pioneers who etched their names into the rock, leaving proof of their passage. Beyond the disease, the trail was a constant series of tough decisions. As the journey progressed, supplies dwindled and animals weakened. The first major cutoff point was often at Fort Laramie. Here, people had to make the agonizing choice to lighten the load. What do you throw away? A cherished piece of furniture? A family heirloom? Blacksmith tools that may save your life? The trail was soon lined with discarded, necessary items, a testament to the escalating desperation and the harsh mathematics of survival. In the high country, the possibility of conflict with Native American tribes, while often sensationalized, was a real concern. More common, however, were trading interactions. The tribes, masters of the land, would often offer vital supplies, knowledge, or even fresh horses in exchange for Eastern goods. Yet, as the number of immigrants swelled, the interactions grew tense, as the pioneers consumed vital resources like buffalo and grass that the tribes depended on. By August, the pioneers reached the greatest natural barrier, the Rocky Mountains. The passage through South Pass in present-day Wyoming was a gentle slope, thankfully, but the terrain was unforgiving. Rocks shattered wagon wheels, and the freezing nights tested the limits of their remaining clothing and blankets. This was the time of attrition. Families, exhausted and frayed, sometimes separated from the main train to travel at their own pace, a dangerous gamble for the final leg. After the Rockies, the calendar became the most dangerous enemy. They still faced the treacherous landscape of the present-day Idaho and Oregon territories, a winding, difficult path that led to the dreaded Blue Mountains. If they delayed for too long, the final miles into the Willamette Valley could be impassable. Wagons had to be dismantled and lowered down steep, rocky cliffs with ropes, a process called roping down. Oxen and horses, exhausted from months of labor, often collapsed and died. The final brutal choice for many was the infamous Barlow Road, a toll road cut through the dense forests around Mount Hood. It was a harrowing, muddy, and tree-strewn path, but it was the final formal route to the finish line, avoiding the dangerous passage down the Columbia River. Then, one day, the trees thinned. After 6 months of dusty, endless plains, towering mountains, and deep river valleys, they saw it, the Willamette Valley. A vast expanse of fertile, level ground, crisscrossed by rivers and shielded by mountains. The land was everything the pamphlets had promised. Exhausted, battered, but alive, the train had arrived. The journey did not end here, however. The camaraderie of the train often dissolved immediately. The goal was land, and the race was on to claim the best plots. The men who had shared bread and buried children together now became rivals. They were not just pioneers. They were agents of change. They opened a continent. Over the next 2 decades, an estimated 400,000 people would follow this path, permanently reshaping the American West. The Oregon Trail, however, remains more than a line on a map. It is a monument to American grit, a powerful reminder of the cost of ambition. It was a path of incredible hardship, driven by a simple, unwavering belief that somewhere, on the edge of the known world, there was a better life, waiting to be earned. They set out to find a promised land, and in doing so, they created a legend. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe for more American history content.